Welcome to the Startup Grind.
Now, we're very lucky because we get to hear from a special guest tonight. Cody Sims is the managing director for Techstars in Los Angeles. He's been at the intersection of media and technology since the early 90s. He's worked at places like the New York Times, NBC.com, Stumbleupon, Yahoo, and he is very impressive, not only his story, but his insights. So I'm very honored to introduce him. And before I do that, we have a tradition at Startup Grind. We don't pay our speakers. These are our busy guys. Everyone's trying to pitch him, and he's coming out here to help LA, to help you guys. So I want to give a warm welcome. I want everyone to stand on their feet and welcome Cody Sims right now.
Thank you very much.
All right, and also, we're trying something new tonight, because this is LA, this is where new cool things happen. So let's just have a show of hands. Has anyone heard of Meerkat, the new application before on Twitter? Okay, a couple people. Cody, why don't you tell them what we're going to do tonight?
Yeah, so this app literally launched, I think, a week ago, Friday or Saturday. It's about 10 or 12 days old, and it's kind of been it's right now. Who knows if it'll stay that way? But right now, it's the next big it app, at least amongst a lot of the digiterati, right? People who are like deeply involved in a lot of what's going on in social media, and so what it does is it's totally bootstrapped on Twitter. You log in with Twitter. When you use it, everything you do is mirrored on Twitter. And it's a live streaming app for mobile. So when we turn it on, all of a sudden, anyone who's following me on Twitter will get a notification that I'm now live streaming off my phone. They can click the link and they can watch along. So we're going to open it up and we're going to go here. It says my followers are waiting for me to open the room. So let's see how this works.
And then also what we're going to do is we're going to take questions at the end. So we're going to do about a 45-minute chat, and then we'll take questions and answers from the audience. So you can ask. If you're shy, you can tweet at Startup Grind LA or Cody Sims. But if you tweet us and you're here, we will find you. Okay?
Yeah. So I'm typing in fireside chat at Startup Grind LA. Yep, and I'm gonna hit stream. And we should now be live. And I'm going to hand this phone off in just a second. Yep, okay, we're live. Hi, everyone. All right, we just turned on the Meerkat. I'm going to hand the phone off. And here, I'll flip this
and
way.
let's do a pan of the room, and let's have everyone wave at the stream, just so we know we have a packed house here. All right.
All right, awesome.
Awesome.
And for those of you on the Meerkat stream, this is Startup Grind LA. So here with Joe, and excited to talk about whatever Joe is going to ask me, I guess.
All right, so normally how we start these is we want to hear about you. We want to hear about your background and how you've gotten to where you are today. So tell us about where you grew up, what you wanted to be, where you went to school, etc.
Yeah, so I was born in Texas, and then when I was 6, I grew up in Kansas. So we moved to, my family and I moved to Wichita, Kansas, and I lived in Wichita from the age of 6 to 22, so I went to college at the University of Kansas as well. Yeah, exactly, Jayhawks. All right, Rock Chalk, fantastic. Jayhawks are tight, man. I had no idea what I wanted to be when I grew up, right? Like I still don't know necessarily what I want to be. I feel like, I think I've always subscribed to life being a little bit of a journey, and I almost call it sort of do something interesting for the next 18 to 24 months and then see what comes next, and then plan again to do it again and again. So when I was younger, things I was into, I was really into tennis. I was really into, actually I did a lot of theater and stuff in high school, right? I have not been on a stage since I was 18. But boy, when I was like 15 to 18, I did a lot of that stuff.
So what was your best role?
Oh, yeah, thank you. I'm so glad you asked that. So, probably the most funny thing I did was when I was about 15 years old, I won. So Nickelodeon used to do this tour where it went to malls around the country and auditioned people to be on Nickelodeon. And the audition was like almost the set of obstacle course challenges you had to take. You had to do like a screen test, and then you had to do you had like a green screen behind you, and you had to like fake that you were like dodging items, and they kept narrowing it down.
I think we have this No, we don't have this
thank
footage.
God. I have.
Someone forgot the thumb
you'll
drive.
get where I'm going. I actually have a copy, and it's never been on the internet. It's one of those things. It's like if it's not on the internet, it doesn't exist in this day and age, right? So anyway, I ended up winning this competition in Wichita, and when you win, it's a trivia. You get slimed because it was Nickelodeon, and like I don't know, people remember whatever that show was where they slimed people. And so they flew me to Orlando, and I actually did the first commercial for Clarissa Explains It All. And yes, there is a copy of it, and yes, it's locked in my house.
Okay, that's great. So you're at the University of Kansas. Talk about your journey there. What were you interested in school? Did you study abroad?
Yeah, so I went to school, no idea what I wanted to study at all. I knew I wanted to study something I didn't know anything about. I grew up in the Midwest. I was from Kansas. We didn't travel very much when I was a kid. That was just my family. We did a lot of vacations. We went to Colorado. We went to places like that. But we didn't travel extensively necessarily. And so I think it was at the beginning of my sophomore year in college, I decided to enroll in a Chinese language class. I had been obsessed with this video game in high school called Romance of the Three Kingdoms. It was this Nintendo game where you like build empires in China. And I thought, hey, maybe I can learn Chinese, and I don't know what that had to do with it, but I fell in love with it. I knew nothing about it going in, and it was so wonderful. And my professor encouraged me to apply to this program in Beijing that was an intensive language program, so I got into the program. So by the end of my sophomore year of college, I flew off to Beijing, again, this, 19-year-old kid from Kansas or whatever I was at the time. And
Dripping with slime.
Yeah, exactly, dripping with slime. And studied Mandarin Chinese, wasn't allowed to speak English at all for 2 months. Even with my roommate, everything, like the rules of the program were the second they sound the bell, you do not speak English for 2 months. And I remember like starting to have dreams in Chinese, and I remember, my parents would call, and you could break the rule to talk to your family, obviously, but I would actually, in the middle of conversation, like start speaking Chinese to them on accident. And so it was just such an amazing experience to completely pull myself out of my comfort zone. And actually the next year I went back to China again. I ended up with an internship down in Guangzhou and worked with the State Department that summer. It happened to be the summer President Clinton came through China, so I got to participate in this whole giant presidential visit. That was crazy. So he was in the city we were staying in, which is a small town in China called Guilin. He was in that city for 8 hours, didn't even spend the night there, and they had set up enough infrastructure in the hotel to reposition every U.S. satellite from that hotel. They were there a week in advance to set that up, and again, he didn't even spend the night there. It's nuts thinking about how intense those visits are. So that was also really interesting and a lot of fun.
I bet. Okay, so you get done with school, you have this crazy experience in China.
Yeah.
What's next?
So I moved to San Francisco. I moved to San Francisco when I was 22, it was late 90s, because I wanted to find a job trying to use my Chinese language skills. I had no skills, right? Like I literally could speak Chinese, and I majored in history and Chinese. And so I could write really well, right? And I could process like what was going on in the world and all of that. And I got to San Francisco, there were no jobs trying to use my Chinese language skills in the late 90s. China wasn't in the WTO, there'd been an Asian financial crisis, and there actually wasn't very much going on. And I didn't even know about this internet thing that was happening. I do remember my freshman year of college, this is dating me, sitting in the computer lab and, Yahoo on the screen. So Yahoo at that point was, I think, like 6 months old. So I actually remember that first time. But so I moved to San Francisco, and I was living in San Mateo for a month with a friend and lots of their friends. I was, I think, the sixth person living in a 2-bedroom apartment. I was sleeping, this sounds like a cliche, man. I was sleeping in a rubber boat in the living room with a shower curtain around me for privacy. And his boss's wife ran human resources for this little startup in San Francisco. I didn't even know what a startup was, called Snap.com, which had spun out of CNET, which at the time was a super hot startup in San Francisco. It was a search engine portal thing. It was kind of like, at the time, Yahoo was the industry leader. It was sort of like Yahoo. And I ended up getting a job there, basically as a human search algorithm data entry person. So my job, this is before Google. This is when search engines were built by people, right? People actually went out and found the websites on the internet and put them in the search engines. That's what I did all day. I managed the travel category, and my job was to find cool travel websites, which was actually really fun, and classify them. So I would type in the title that would show up when you got them in the search results. I would paste in the URL. I would write a little 256-character description because that was the size of the database back then. You could only go to 256 characters, and that was sort of how it worked. And then that company ended up getting. This has happened kind of right before I started. NBC bought it and merged it with another company, and they actually took it public on the NASDAQ. The stock went up to like $110, and then like 9 months later, the stock was at $2, and everyone got laid off. And that was my first job. So like literally 1999 to 2000 to 2001. Such a crazy time. And since then I've been kind of sucked into the tech world and the tech media world, and I've been doing it ever since.
So obviously that first job had to have a profound effect on you. What was the big thing that you learned, or what was the big eye-opener there?
Well, I think, as someone who had majored in history and Chinese, it was really almost hard for me that the thing I had worked on for 2 years then all of a sudden just was gone. Like, here I am, this guy who really loves archival records and historical things, and when the company got shut down because the NASDAQ crashed, it was shut off. Everything I'd worked on for 2 years was just gone. And I took that really hard. So actually my wife and I, she was my fiance at the time, we moved back to Kansas for a year. I ended up taking a job at Sprint, and there was kind of the very start of mobile, and Sprint was building the first downloadable ringtone engine. And so I got to work on that project. And I have to say, after I'd been doing tech at that point for a couple years, I kind of got into product management as I was doing this, and I was a product manager. And I found myself, I remember specifically, I was loading ringtones into this ringtone engine, and the names of the ringtone was Fart 1 and Fart 2. And there was an email that went pretty high up about whether it should be called Fart Oops or Fart Juicy. Or Fart 1 or Fart 2, and I was like, I kind of was like, okay, this probably isn't for me anymore. And I applied to graduate school. I applied to graduate school in London because they had rolling admissions. So I applied in June. I was in school by, I think, August or September. Just like, boom. And we packed up, moved. And, I think it's impulsive. It's sort of kind of definitely. But that tends to be something that I do a lot of, which is I decide I'm ready for a change or a new challenge, and it's time to go try something else out. So I went to graduate school in London for a media studies degree to sort of understand, with all this internet stuff I had lived through, how was the whole media world changing, and in particular, how was it changing in countries outside the United States. So we packed up and moved to London.
Okay, so at this time, were you aware that every 18 to 24 months you were going to try something new, or were you still trying to get your feet set?
No, I had no freaking idea. I was so stressed out, and I think, for me at least, my mid to early 20s were really angsty. I was doing fine, and I had all these amazing experiences, but I definitely was feeling angsty about what's happening, where am I going to be? And part of this was this whole industry was just being created as we were doing it, and so there was no path. There was no path. The product management didn't. It existed in old school software development, but it didn't really exist. Internet product management didn't exist when I started in the world of internet product management. These paths got created as we were going, and so I think that I think by nature I'm actually relatively conservative in terms of my ability to just try all sorts of new things. I worry a lot. I personally worry a lot. And I think that gave me angst, not knowing what the path was, but for some reason, maybe I'm, whatever, I just kept doing it.
Okay, so paint the picture. You're in London. What year is it?
Yep.
What was the next chapter?
That was 2002, 2003.
Okay.
So in London, I thought maybe I was going to go and actually go into academia, right? Go get a PhD after my master's program and go do that full time. And then my wife got into graduate school in New York right after London. British masters are only one-year programs, so we moved to New York. And I actually I had a buddy who was working at NewYorkTimes.com, and I thought, again, I finished this big media degree, and I kind of thought I wanted to go into academia. I didn't know for sure. A 1 year of graduate school was maybe enough for me, and I had a buddy at New York Times. It's like, okay, I have an opportunity to go work at the New York Times. These are doors I've opened for myself by pioneering, being part of these sort of pioneering new pathways. I'm not a journalist. I'm not a media executive. I'm this guy who fell into this weird industry called the internet, and that has resulted in me being able to go work at a brand and at a company like the New York Times. I'm going to go give that a shot. And so I started working at the New York Times in 2003, and I was there 2003 to 2005, and at the time, digital was we were our own thing. We were actually in its own building. It wasn't integrated into the newsroom at all. It was very different than how the company is there today. It was just but it was fascinating. I got to go walk around all the Pulitzers and got to see all the history of the New York Times, which was really amazing.
So right now in this room, if we talked about classified advertising, everyone would probably think we're speaking about the 80s and the 90s, right? So 2003 to 2005, tell me what was happening at New York Times, and tell me about classified ads.
It was a really, actually interesting time for the newspaper industry. I mean, that's right in the middle of two things. First was the wave of things like Monster.com and kind of job boards that were showing up on the internet. I remember when I moved to San Francisco in '99, Monster had just launched. It was a startup, right? And but I still remember in '99, you're making me sound really old. You would go to the coffee shop and you would still look at the newspaper ads for jobs, right? You would find jobs that way. Now this is 4 years later. This is 2003, but Monster has gotten big market share. There was a company called Career Builder that had rolled up a bunch of other newspaper networks, and they were creating a job board. And then of course there was Craigslist, right? So, and that just came and all of a sudden became the place that you went to find work. LinkedIn ended up, I think it launched in 2004, 2005. I was at the New York Times when LinkedIn launched. And so there was all these changes happening, and this was a big chunk of the revenue side of these industries. So it was interesting from the inside watching how, an industry like news and media was changing from the inside out in a way that, you may not have realized on the outside.
So when that happened, when LinkedIn launched, when Craigslist was going live, what was the conversation like internally at the New York Times about the future of advertising and the future of print? Yeah, I think most of the conversations on the digital side in that era was still mostly about display advertising. I think classifieds were changing, and I think people saw that a ramp up in digital display was probably going to be how digital would combat that. Certainly working on, digital classified ads was something that they were doing, but I think more of the effort was focused on, is a bunch of media dollars going to move online through this display advertising world? Okay, so and you're in New York City, right? And you get done with New York Times in 2005. What's next? Yeah, so this is probably when I start to build a little bit more philosophy around what I'm doing and why I'm doing it, and it's a little less random. So 2005 started with random. So it started with a call from Yahoo asking me if I wanted to come take a job out here in LA. And I never thought I was ever going to move in LA, right? It never even popped into my head that I would move to LA. I grew up in Kansas. I had been in a city where you drove everywhere to get around, and then I had lived in San Francisco and New York and London.
London, New York. And, I thought, LA, that's just like cars and traffic and smog. Why would I do that? And
here we are.
Here we are. And so, so Yahoo called and I came out, and I still remember. We came out for the interview, and it was with the Yahoo office, which at the time was up in Pasadena. It was what was Overture became Yahoo Search Marketing. It was all their search advertising business. And I came out, and we had been living in a tiny studio apartment in Brooklyn where literally you walked out the door to like trash barrels were right outside our door. Like the entire apartment's trash barrels were right outside our door of our unit, right? Like, yeah. And so we come out and Yahoo put us up at the Ritz in Pasadena. I found out later they had a corporate rate. It was like $110. But we're staying there at the Ritz.
Important at the time,
no, we're staying there at the Ritz. I'm interviewing up in Pasadena. The mountains are there. It's beautiful. My wife's hanging out at the pool. It's the MTV Music Awards that day, and Eminem's hanging out at the pool. It's like, this place is crazy. So we decided to just do it and moved out here. I kind of embraced the fact I'd been part of this industry. I'd been part of this internet thing. And decided let's okay, what if we go all in on this? What if we decide this is what we're going to do? What if I decide this is interesting to me? Where it's changing all these media industries that I've gravitated around the kind of with New York Times and NBC, and I've been part of. Well, what if digital and what if tech is actually the future of these things, right? What if
at the time that wasn't obvious, right?
Not obvious at all. So what if I can actually be part of the change wave as opposed to trying to come in from the top down on these things? And I decided to go for it. So we moved out here to Yahoo in 2005, and I started working on a team where we were building products to distribute Yahoo functionality out to third-party websites, which Yahoo really didn't do much of at the time. Yahoo was, it was a portal, right? And so they're actually doing that a lot now with all their Flurry acquisition and all that kind of stuff that they're now pushing out. They had big announcements to that end a few weeks ago, which I think is the right strategy for them. I think that's great. 10 years ago, I was trying to work on that at Yahoo. So, and I think at that time is when I started taking again a bit more directional approach to what I'm doing next and what I'm going to focus on for the next chunks of my life.
Completely. So, how long were you at Yahoo for?
I was at Yahoo 7 years.
Okay, so.
Yeah.
A lot more happened in 7 years.
7 years, yeah. We saw the rise of Google, we saw the rise of Facebook, we saw the rise of Twitter. I saw all that from inside Yahoo. It was fascinating.
So what was your focus specifically?
So I basically had 3 roles at Yahoo over 7 years, 3 different jobs, and each one of them was done intentionally. So I started doing these kind of distributed ad products out to publishers, and I really realized pretty quickly. By the way, one of the reasons I wanted to move to Yahoo was 2 things I really wanted to learn. I wanted to learn social media, so I moved to Yahoo. But 2005, Yahoo had just acquired Flickr. It acquired Delicious like a month after I moved there. Again, Facebook was a tiny team in Boston at the time, I think, or maybe they'd been in Palo Alto by then. And I wanted to learn global, so I wanted to really learn how a company operated at global scale. And I got to do both of those like crazy. So I got to work on, in projects at Yahoo to, integrate Yahoo's different social platforms together, all their identity platforms, OpenID, all this stuff. I got to do integrations with Twitter and Facebook APIs and all this stuff. And I got to work on massive global teams. That was really fascinating. Getting to travel around the world to different cities, understand how different cultures are consuming media in different ways. Very eye-opening for me. I mean, it was a great experience. And then for a chunk of my time there, I was actually commuting to Sunnyvale. I commuted from LA to Sunnyvale for 3 years, every week. And in 2010, an opportunity came up down here in the Santa Monica office to lead Yahoo's media and entertainment products, things like Yahoo Movies and OMG and sites like that. And so I decided to do that, where I could actually really work and live in LA. And that was great, and that was for me my entry into the entertainment industry, which I didn't really necessarily have before that. I got to learn, I got to manage a portfolio of 6 different entertainment verticals, so I got to learn how music worked, how movies worked, how TVs worked, how games worked, how the kind of celebrity news cycle worked, and be part of all of that from a global perspective, which was cool.
So while you were at Yahoo, what was the most challenging time or the most challenging obstacle that you had to overcome?
Well, again, Yahoo was crazy then, right? We had 6 CEOs in 7 years. We had, we saw the rise of Google, Facebook, all this stuff. So there was a lot of chaos. And what I think I gravitated toward was working with great people. And I think at that era of Yahoo, especially on the early side of when I was there, some of the people that were there were just amazing. So when I took the role, kind of working on Yahoo Developer Network and opening up a lot of Yahoo's APIs and stitching things together, my boss at the time, who actually brought me into that role, was Chad Dickerson, who's now the CEO of Etsy. Just an absolutely amazing person. And that was a real eye-opener for me when you work for like this amazing leader, what it feels like, and how much you can learn. And I don't think I'd ever really had a mentor. I think I'd kind of floated around and kind of was a little bit headless. And getting to work for someone like Chad, I got to understand when you work for someone that you deeply respect and you see them leading in so many ways that you almost want to be, how exciting that was. And that team was, there were a lot of other really talented people on that team that went on to either do amazing things or still are doing really amazing things.
So you departed Yahoo in what year?
2012.
2012.
Yep.
And to Stumbleupon.
Yep.
So, like you said, you had kind of moved to following and gravitating towards great people versus new opportunities, or was it a little bit of both?
Well, Stumbleupon was a little bit of both, right? So, from a great people perspective, one of the founders of Stumbleupon is Garrett Camp, who's also one of the founders of Uber, and is now one of the founders of Uber was Garrett's idea, right? Uber came out of Garrett's head. He got the initial prototype up and running. And then, from there, he's also now running a startup studio lab in San Francisco called Expa, which has just rolled out Reserve. If any of you have used Reserve to book restaurants, that came out of Expa, which is Garrett's studio. So one of the most brilliant product tech minds of our generation. So getting a chance to, go up there and get a chance to engage and work with him was an interesting opportunity for me to take. And then I also, thought Stumbleupon very much is at the center of content discovery, mobile, a lot of different ways that people are consuming content in different ways. So I thought that was a cool opportunity as well.
How many people have used Stumbleupon or heard of Stumbleupon? Pretty much everyone. Awesome. So while you were at Stumbleupon, you did a lot of UI work with your team and made the product better, right? Now, tell us about the slide. Because I'm sure we're all familiar with the Tinder swipe, correct? And how that's been integrated into every other app that's on your phone. So tell us about what happened to Stumbleupon with the slide.
Oh, well, I don't think we should overplay that. It was but it was definitely a way we were trying to enable navigation in mobile, which was, to be able to quickly swipe and get a preview of the content you want to look at before you decide to double in and really go deep on a site.
So when you were making those type of changes, how much at the time was simple UI important for a good product?
Simple UI is critical for a good product, and it's really hard to do. It's really hard to do well.
Do you know that from a user's perspective or from a creator's perspective, or a bit of both?
In terms of how hard it is to do?
In terms of how usability, and then so like just putting out a good product, right?
Yeah.
How did you learn to become a product guy?
Yeah, so it's really interesting. I'd been doing product for a long time, and I went to Stumbleupon, and I'm sure I did so many things wrong. I'd been operating products in big companies and managing teams where you end up working more on what are the priorities of the company than how are the users experiencing your product. And I think that's bad. That's not the right orientation for anyone who's touching product. And I learned a lot at Stumbleupon. I learned a lot about how to properly do experimentation, A/B testing, how to really talk to users and understand what users want, do those things the right way. And I mean, that's the right orientation for product, and it requires just a lot of observing your users, interviewing your users, watching them, running experiments, making sure if you're building product, you set up experimentation, A/B testing frameworks, and you know how to use them well. Like if you're building products and you're not doing that stuff, you're gonna run into a lot of problems. So, and I think, that orientation is so ingrained now, I think, in the next generation of product managers. Again, this industry didn't exist when I started doing it. I mean, when I started as a product manager, you were writing a document called a PRD, which was this big, waterfall method development. And so I think it's amazing how fast this industry has changed and adapted to new methods.
Well, it's interesting to think. I know I can remember Yahoo's homepage.
Yeah.
And now you think about Google's homepage, and you think about the simplicity of apps like Snapchat and apps like Meerkat, and how quickly things can take off because of their simplicity and how focused they are. Okay, so Stumbleupon, you learned a lot. It was fun. You're in LA. What's next?
I was in San Francisco. So I left LA in 2012.
You made the big move.
Yeah,
and you were there for only a year?
We were there for a year, and we realized we really, really missed LA as a family. This is very much a family thing. And we moved back down in 2013. And I saw what was happening down here with so much change and so much new opportunity here in LA. There's amazing opportunity in the Bay Area. But I felt here in LA, it was a little bit of a different orientation to how people were approaching entrepreneurship in general. Here, I think, there's all sorts of great tech startups, but there's also so many great storytellers, and I thought the combination of those two here is really powerful. LA has had an amazing set of entrepreneurs that are a different style of entrepreneur, right? You've got people who've been in the film industry, in the television industry, in the creative industries, who often are working for themselves or self-employed, whether you're a screenwriter or you're a designer or whatever you are. And I think the convergence of all of that coming together, you've seen through people that are doing really innovative things on YouTube, on Snapchat, on Vine. But I think that entrepreneurial wave is going all the way up and down the stack. You're seeing super deep tech here. You're seeing really creative storytelling. And moving back down to become a part of that was so exciting for me. And we just love Los Angeles. We had grown to love it. It had grown to feel like home, and we missed it.
Okay, so now, had your opportunity with Techstars already presented itself prior to leaving San Francisco?
No, okay. It hadn't. We moved down here because we wanted to be back in LA. And I think I had been talking to Techstars, but it wasn't formally lined up. Formally lined up pretty shortly thereafter, but no, we moved down just solely because we wanted to be in LA. And so I think I joined Techstars in September of 2013, right at the beginning of that month, and then Techstars had been talking with Disney, which is the company we work with down here in LA. We talk a little bit more about that. We've been talking with Disney, but even that wasn't lined up. It was a little bit risky, right? I knew I wanted to do this, but we didn't even have a contract to have a program down here, and I joined, and again, back to working with amazing people: David Cohen, Brad Feld, David Brown, Mark Solon. The people who are running Techstars are amazing people.
So I'm sure everyone knows what Techstars is, but tell us a little about Techstars, how it got started, a few of the companies that have come through the program.
Yeah, so Techstars, we are a mentorship-focused accelerator that helps startup companies really advance their business and their product to the next level by deeply engaging with local startup communities. So we operate accelerators in 17 cities around the world, not 17 cities, we operate 17 programs around the world. I think it's in 10 or 12 cities. We have a couple cities that have multiple programs. And our real focus is finding great mentors in those cities, catalyzing a mentor community in a city, and then connecting entrepreneurs with those cities, with the companies that get into our programs. So we end up selecting roughly 10 companies per program that we operate. It started in 2007 in Boulder, Colorado by Brad Feld, David Cohen, David Brown, and a fourth co-founder, a gentleman named Jared Polis, who's now actually a Colorado congressman. And started really small. Started with 10 companies in Boulder, Colorado. The next year, 10 more companies in Boulder, Colorado. The year after that, expanded to Boston. So by the end of the third year of Techstars, there'd been a net total of 40 companies that had been through Techstars. And from there, it's really expanded and taken off. So now we have, I think we've had, by the end of this year, it'll be well over 600 companies that have gone through the Techstars world in our various programs. And about half of our programs are what we call our city programs. So they're really focused on enabling that local startup community and catalyzing it. Techstars New York, Techstars Boulder, Techstars London, Techstars Seattle, Techstars Austin, Techstars Chicago, Berlin, et cetera. And about half of our programs are, we operate them together with a corporate partner or set of partners and focus deeply on a vertical. So for example, we're now running a robotics one down in San Diego together with Qualcomm. We're running a fintech one all about disruptive next-gen finance with Barclays out of both London, and we just expanded that program into New York. We're operating, we have one in Detroit that we're doing, that we just started this year, that we're doing together with Ford and Verizon and a couple of other partners, all focused on next-generation mobility. So everything from automotive to ride-sharing to on-demand services, how the future of how you get around is changing. And so the program we're doing here in LA is Disney Accelerator powered by Techstars. So it's deeply, working with Disney, helping find tech startups in the, that are in the media and entertainment world. Everything from mobile video to mobile gaming to sports to ad tech to publishing to news to virtual reality, you name it. We're finding those companies and bringing them here to LA for 3 months, engaging them deeply with the Disney executive team, but also very deeply with the local entrepreneurial community and investor community in LA. And we completed our first year last October.
Awesome. So how many companies was that?
10 companies.
Okay.
So, yeah.
And tell us a little bit about how that went. How was that learning experience? Because obviously, like you said in the beginning, every 18 to 24 months you're doing something new. So this is a little new for you, right?
Very different, right? So I've been, I've done product. I've, kind of worked in the media entertainment world in product. But this is a different side for me to be part of, where my job all day is to help companies. It's to help startups, whether it's thinking through product, whether it's thinking through fundraising, whether it's thinking through, business development relationships, hiring. My job is to be helpful to companies. It's the best job in the world. I mean, I'm there to my job is to help. And I think it aligns really well. I feel like my mentality aligns well with a lot of the things that Techstars generally believes in. And some of the things you said at the beginning when you were talking about the startup grind mentality, which is give first, right? Try to pay it forward. Try to be helpful to someone before you ask for something in return. Believing in the notion of a network over hierarchy. So the notion that helping to connect nodes together strengthens everyone, as opposed to kind of having to go up through, gates and permissions. And again, that's my orientation. I came into the media space through the technology world. So I think all of that has been great. I don't know if I answered the question you asked, though.
No, totally. I mean, so segueing from last year's class, and trying new things to this year. Yeah. The applications are now open, right?
Yeah.
So just tell us a little bit about that. Where can we apply?
Oh, sure.
Who's it for?
Oh, yeah. So applications are open. DisneyAccelerator.com. Again, it's tech startups in the media and entertainment world. Applications are open until April 19th. And then, so we're out looking, talking, meeting lots and lots and lots of great companies right now. And then roughly for 4 to 6 weeks thereafter, we'll start to really deep dive in on ones that we're looking to get to know better. And then the program will start in July. 10 companies will co-locate at the Disney Accelerator space, which is in Glendale near the Disney campus. And it's a 3-month program where we'll put you and your company through so many different, engagements with the Disney team, with the mentor community, and then also just working on building your business. And then at the end of it, there's we work to help you try to raise capital, raise funding, all of that.
Awesome, wonderful. Okay, so I think I have a few more questions, and then we'll open it up to the audience and to Meerkat and Twitter. But I think what a lot of people are interested in hearing about is where you think the future of media and technology is going. What is exciting?
Yeah. I have no idea. I mean, seriously, it would be, you have to be humble around that. You can't know, because innovation happens when you least expect it. And if you think you know where it's going, you're going to miss where things are actually coming from. 14 days ago, no one was talking about Meerkat, and it's taking the world by storm in terms of how you can now access information, live video information, which is truth and reality and everything all in one, from anywhere on the planet. And those have existed before, but the specific way this app was stitched together didn't exist 14 days ago. So for me, trying to postulate on the future of media and entertainment, I feel like would be a disservice to all the people who are innovating and trying new things. I'm here to meet great entrepreneurs who have those visions and help them achieve them, as opposed to trying to guess where the market's going.
Totally. No, and I think that's the best answer, and especially because, we've all been here and our lives have changed dramatically from technology. So who's to say it's not someone in this room that'll create the next billion-dollar company? So be nice to the people you're sitting next to. So before we open up to questions, I want to talk about LA. How can we continue to grow and flourish as a startup community?
So I find the LA community very, very open, very helpful to one another, and I think the fact, it's amazing. I see very few faces in this room tonight that I know, and I think that's so great, right? Different people are coming out, meeting new people, engaging in the community, helping one another. I love your suggestion to figure out someone in the room you can help tonight. Figure out how you, what your niche is and what your role is and where you can be most helpful. Zero in on the things that you're great at and how you can use that to your advantage. This isn't directly about LA, but one of the things I think I've learned over the years is lead with your strength as much as you ever can. Know what you're good at, be self-aware about what you're good at, and put those things first, and try to be useful to people in those contexts. I try to do that right now with Techstars. I haven't exited some giant company myself. I don't have that life experience to give to companies that are in my program necessarily, but I've worked in the product world and in the media and entertainment tech world for 15 plus years, and I can lead with that experience, and I think I can be really helpful in that experience. Know what you're good at, know what you're not, know where your blind spots are, and you can do one of two things with your blind spots, I've found. First, the most important thing is to be self-aware of them. Know what they are. Try to figure out what they are, and you'll often figure out what they are by asking, right? I think one of the most powerful things people can do is, with someone you know fairly well, look at them and say, what's one thing as a leader I do that you really respect, that you think I'm really great at? So you know, and it's always a little awkward for the person on the other end of that question, but you kind of know how people view you, and then to ask the opposite question, which is, what's one thing I can do that I have a lot of room for improvement on? And that's a really helpful way for you to understand how others perceive you and perceive your blind spots. Because to me, it doesn't really matter what you think you're bad at. If other people think you're really bad at this other thing that you didn't even know you were bad at, you got to figure out what to do about that. You can do one of two things. Back to my two things. You can try to improve that thing, which is great. If you want to well-round yourself out and focus on that, because that is an area you really want to get better at. It's hard. There's a capital cost to investing your time in something you're not great at versus investing your time to be the thing you are great at, to be better at it. Or you can avoid that thing like the plague, which is totally fine to do. Totally fine to avoid your weaknesses. And if you do, though, I'm sorry, guys, I didn't even realize there's people over here. I'm sorry I've had my back to you guys the whole time. If you do that, be transparent about it, right? Like when someone asks you to do something, just say, you know what? That's an area I'm just not great at. And so rather than pretend I am, fumble it, and waste everyone's time, why don't we talk to Nancy over here, who's really good at that? Let me put you in touch with her and see if this can work out. So anyway, the question was how can what can LA do? And I think it's what can everyone in this room do to make LA better? It's really know what you're great at and lead with those things and offer to help with those things, and then also know where your weaknesses are and be real about them. Don't try to be something you're not.
Well, I can just say from the last two questions you've answered that I feel like a great theme maybe for you, but and your career and potentially for people in this room is just humility, right? I mean, we don't know what we don't know. I mean, being able to understand that you can't identify the next big media technology trend is a huge first step. And then taking that into your everyday life to be able to say, there are going to be things I'm not great at. I'm not going to be, the best coder in the world or the best CEO in the world or the guy who does the numbers. So having the humility to be able to understand what you don't know or what you're not going to know, I think is huge.
Really important. Yeah, and self-awareness. I think those two things are really great. I know there have been times in my career, especially when I was younger, where I didn't have that, and I had ego get in the way, or I had, just thought I could do everything, and that's usually not true. And usually you're failing at something and you don't even really know it, and that's not good. So yeah, the more you can be self-aware of your strengths and weaknesses, I think the stronger an entire community can get.
Let's open up for questions. Yeah, right. You can go ahead.
What are your three favorite sort of entrepreneurial focused books, or what would be three life-changing books you would recommend?
Oh wow, 3 books.
One is fine. Whatever.
One is fine. So, again, as a kind of media and information nerd, one book that I love from a content subject matter perspective is a book called The Master Switch by Tim Wu, which is like the whole entire history of communication and media and how it's changed, starting literally from the telegraph, all the way up through where we are today, and it's all basically the continued pendulum between open and closed networks. So that's a super nerdy media book, right? A great read for anyone who's trying to run a company, start a company right now is oh gosh, what is the name of it? It's Venture Deals by Brad Feld. So that is the Bible, right, for how to, if you're trying to raise capital for your company, how to think about how the entire sort of both angel, seed, and venture capital markets work from an entrepreneur's perspective, from a VC's perspective, and from the people who invest in VC funds, which are called LPs, from their perspective. If you haven't read that book and you're trying to run a startup right now, you should do that book. You should read that book for sure. I'm going to leave it at those two for now. So that's both a subject matter book and a content book. Yeah, so the question is, what do I see as the difference between the local LA startup environment and the European startup environment? The London, UK. I mean, I lived in London 12 years ago, right? So, I don't know that I know the answer to that necessarily, that would answer with any degree of certainty. I know London has had a lot of success as well, starting in a certain region in the Shoreditch area and kind of growing the tech community out from there, and it's expanded quite broadly from there now. I think the same thing sort of happened in LA here, where Santa Monica and Venice were sort of this initial hub, and you're seeing it expand out now into downtown. You're seeing it expand out into Culver City, into Hollywood. I mean, that's more of a geographical answer. In terms of tech, the types of tech that each of those cities focus on. I mean, I don't know that I know London particularly enough myself to comment on that. Yeah. Question in the back?
Can you give us an example of one of your Techstars companies and how much they raised as an example of how successful they became?
Sure, absolutely. So I'll give you a few examples of companies that have gone through Techstars that you've probably heard of, and then I can also talk about a few of the companies that just went through our last program and some of the experiences they've had here in LA with the Disney Accelerator. So a few companies that you've heard of from Techstars, probably SendGrid was originally in Techstars, came through Techstars. DigitalOcean, you may have heard of, super big infrastructure play right now. ClassPass which is now allowing you to connect to gym memberships all around the country. They just raised a $40 million Series B, I think it was. DigitalOcean, by the way, Andreessen Horowitz led their most recent round. A company called Keen.io, which also raised a sizable round recently. We had a company that went through Techstars Boulder and then came to LA last summer to do Disney Accelerator. So they came and did essentially a second accelerator called Sphero, and that they make this amazing robotic ball. You can drive around with your smartphone. You can buy it at the Apple Store. So Sphero, they've raised tens of millions of dollars as well coming out, and had an amazing experience in our accelerator. Are working on something really cool that I can't talk about, but I'm really excited about. And we had, coming out of our last program, there was an app over the weekend called Show Your Disney Side that ended up number 8 in the App Store, like not in a category, like number 8.
iOS, right?
Yeah, on iOS, in the iOS App Store, number 8. Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Snapchat, Show Your Disney Side. And that was developed by a company that came through our accelerator last summer called Tiffin, which was 3 guys in Japan who had just bootstrapped their business, never raised money, came through and, built this app. As a result of participating in the accelerator, took it, and within within 3 days of launching, we're number 8 in the App Store. So that's a really cool example of a company that came through Disney Accelerator and has done some really interesting things. All told, I think Techstars companies collectively have raised about a little over $1 billion in venture capital, and again, that's across a portfolio of about 500 companies right now. And then we also have a venture fund at Techstars in addition to our accelerators. And so we've had some really interesting companies that have been part of our venture fund. Uber we were really early in Uber. Twilio, there's a company here in Santa Monica called Scopely that Techstars invested in very early. So yeah, hopefully that answers your question.
You see a lot of companies that are good companies, but maybe not appropriate for venture capital for Techstars investment specifically. What do you advise? How can you make that distinction, and what do you advise for those companies to do in terms of raising money for the business?
Yeah, so companies that come through our accelerators, or just companies in general?
Companies that just apply to Techstars that maybe aren't looking to reach the type of market that would be appropriate.
That they don't want to reach a venture capital scale market?
Yeah, maybe they're not even informed that is
Okay.
a thing.
Okay. What do we advise companies that may not be ready for venture scale type of growth? Okay. So, first of all, not every startup needs to be a venture scale startup, and that's totally okay, right? For some reason, we've created this myth of these billion-dollar companies. Well, it's not a myth, there are a lot of them, but we've created this notion that that's the only way to be successful. There are plenty of companies, that are incredibly successful bootstrapping, building revenue, building a really comfortable business for themselves that actually spins off, cash on a monthly basis to the founders and owners of the company and allows people to live an incredibly comfortable, if not incredibly well-off life. That happens all the time. In non-tech world, that's called a small business. It's like totally fine. It's great. Most people in the United States, I think, I don't know if this stat's right, run a small business. So just because you take the notion of a small business and drop it on a technology platform doesn't mean it has to be a venture capital business. In fact, I think we're going to see with the notion, with the accessibility of access to things like General Assembly where we are and learning how to code and the increased change of technology in our lives, I think we're going to see a whole lot more tech-based small businesses over the next decade. And that's totally great and fine. It may not be appropriate for a program like Techstars, and we try to tell companies that. And I try to, again, back to intellectual honesty and being honest with yourself, I try to get companies to think about that. Okay, I know you applied to Techstars. Is this what you want to do? Do you want to take these, checks from investors who, by the way, they want their money back? You don't take a check from an investor and yeehaw, I raised $1 million, game over. right? They're looking for a big return on that, which is a whole lot different kind of company than if you are going to be able to generate, three of you generating $200,000 a month, $300,000 a month, and like actually keeping cash flow out of that business and living super comfortably. That's a fine business too. You don't have to pick the I'm going to shoot for $1 billion path. Yeah.
What are the top 3 prerequisites you recommend for companies coming into Techstars?
Great. What are the 3 things we look for companies coming in Techstars? There are 6 of them. Though they're kind of 4, but there's 6. So the first 3, and this is just because this is how important it is to us, is team, right? So we say team, team, team are the first 3 things we look for. And what does that mean? With team, it's a whole lot of things rolled into one. It's, are you intellectually honest? Are you self-aware? A lot of the things I talked about, right? Are you able to have an open conversation about what is and isn't working in your business? Because at an early stage startup, if you can't do that, you are going to fail. If you can't recognize what's not working and make a change, it's not going to work. So we look really closely for things like that. Are you coachable? Are you someone that the mentor, again, a big thing for us is helping mentors engage with these companies. Are the mentors that are part of the program going to want to work with you? These are a little bit squishy and intangible, but they're incredibly important. We spend a lot of time getting to know you. And that's why with Techstars, by the way, a little bit of a whatever that is, non sequitur, we don't have a formal interview process. You'll apply to Techstars, and you may get an email or you may get a ping from someone at Techstars saying hey, do you have a minute to chat? Love to learn more. Can you hop on a Skype? Can you hop on a Google Hangout? Can you meet at a coffee shop? And it might be a 15-minute conversation, and then 3 weeks later, it might happen again. And by the end of it, by the time we're ready to choose the company, hopefully we've talked to everyone 2 or 3 times that we're seriously considering. And a lot of this is us just getting to know you, right? Are you someone that we think has what it takes to deal with all the ups and downs of being a startup? And then, there are some, not that they're resume things, but there are things that we look for that are important. Have you started a company before? Have you seen an outcome before? Do you have a network who's going to be able to help you? Those are not requirements, but they're all little data points that are helpful, right? They all add up. And someone who's checking the box on all those, that's really, that's a good sign. So team, team, team. Next, we look for market. So again, who knows where the industry and where the world is going, but you have a sense of to some extent of what markets are on the way up and what markets are on the way down. Or what devices are hitting the market in the next year to where things that are building on top of them are going to find a runway. If you were, building mobile apps starting in 2008, you had a runway. You had a hockey stick runway. And so, looking for those types of trends. Where are markets shifting and changing, and is your business in the tailwinds end of that? That's important. Progress is number 5. So can you show progress? Are you showing progress with your business? And again, this is why we'll try to even talk to you a few times over a maybe 2-month period. We're actually even looking to see if that progress is happening while we've been getting to know you. That's really impressive. If the first time we meet you, you're here, and then we meet you 3 weeks later and you're already here, then we meet you another 3 weeks later and you're already here, ooh, that's interesting. It doesn't mean even, though, that it has to be an in-product progress. So we're looking for signs that you're scrappy, you can hustle, and you know how to talk to customers, you know how to listen to customers, and you know how to deal with that. So part of progress could literally be, how are you validating this market? How are you learning from customers that what you're trying to build is the right thing to build? So even if you haven't launched yet, that's okay. You can show progress if you can say, hey, we talked to this many customers, we found these data points, we ran these experiments in stores with this really junky box thing that we set up, and we watched how people used it for a day, and here are the results we got. Anything, show us data that what you're working on is interesting and that it's moving, right? That's progress. And then the 6th, and the least important of the 6, is the idea. What is the product? What is the idea? Because odds are it's going to change to some extent during the early phase of a company's life. I think somewhere around 20% of companies that come into our accelerators shift ideas completely. We had a company that was in our program, in our Disney Accelerator program this summer called Narrative. They came into the company with a company called Kogo. And they started in the YouTube space. They ended. Now they are one of the leading, if not the first, marketing and analytics platform for Snapchat, helping brands get massive distribution across the Snapchat network by connecting them with influencers. They didn't even have that business coming into the program, right? So what your idea is, if you check all those other 5 boxes I mentioned, the idea is less important because it very well may change.
I think we have time for 1 or 2 more questions.
Do we have any Twitter or do we want to do any online?
Have we got any Meerkat or tweets yet? No? No questions in yet?
Okay.
A lot of praise, though.
Oh, that's good. All right. And obviously no one's shy here. So.
Yeah, go ahead.
So which is the one startup in LA right now that's making all the right moves in which you see a lot of potential?
Oh, that's a loaded question. What's the one startup in LA that's making all the right moves?
Does it have to be a startup?
Yeah, well, define startup, right?
Probably 1 to 2 years old.
That might be even tougher with that added on top.
I'm super bullish on how video is changing, how the world of video is changing. I think companies that are doing that are interesting. I think companies that are engaging mobile and video are interesting. There's a company called Victorious that I think is really cool because that's where they are. They're at the intersection of mobile and video and changing how storytelling is happening in that way. I think that's an interesting path to be on.
Awesome. Well, before we give a big round of applause, because it's well-deserved for Cody and his time, I want to thank all the volunteers. I want to thank 2 Cents, Matt, for bringing the video crew out, GA, Sam for the sponsorship, obviously Google for Entrepreneurs, my buddies in the front for volunteering, Albert, Sandra, my parents for making the trip, and then of course, we have a couple great events coming up. So our next event is April 28th with Eva Ho. The event after that is May 14th with Monica Doty. In June, we'll be hosting the Swagsbucks founders, and this is exclusive, just announced today. We will be hosting Gary Vaynerchuk in July. So you don't want to miss any of these events. We're gonna keep having amazing speakers. Hopefully, just like Cody, I don't know if anybody can really fill these shoes. This is a great talk. So let's give a giant thank you to Cody.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. Good job.
Super fun, Joe. Thank you.
So now we have the last portion of the event is networking. We've been tired. Stretch, shake your arms, meet some people, see who you can help, have fun, and we'll see you next month. Thank you, everyone.
All right.
Awesome. Hey, that was great. Yeah, thank you.